the 26th of September 1974. We just arrived in camp. It's 7:30 and we've seen a 22-inch track on the trail, and we just heard some noises, so I'm going to try to record it. We're in for a night view.
You shouldn't talk to this. That's our job. We know where we went for tracks and all that for sure. I heard them cross the creek. There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow. It sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah. Right there, I just seen moving right through there.
G'day everybody. On this episode of Hastings County Sasquatch, we have the pleasure of interviewing Ron Morehead, who is regarded as one of the leading researchers and eyewitnesses in the field of Bigfoot study, as well as decades of worldwide research into the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena. His breakthrough evidence of the Sasquatch use of language in the 1970s, which he documented through audio recordings known as the Sierra Sounds, are to date the only Bigfoot recordings that have been scientifically studied and accredited as being genuine. Those recordings have been backed up by science and confirmed by experts including Scott Nelson, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy, whose trade or military occupation specialty was as a Cryptologic Technician Interpreter. Upon hearing the Sierra Sounds audio, Nelson quickly recognized that the Sasquatch were speaking in a language and was able to transcribe the Morehead recordings into a 75-page transcript. In addition to being a keynote speaker at numerous conventions, Morehead has been featured on countless radio programs, including Coast to Coast AM, as well as BBC TV documentaries and the Learning Channel. He has documented his personal interactions with the giant beings and produced his story on both CD and in his book Voices in the Wilderness, as well as his latest work, Quantum Bigfoot. Ron, it's a pleasure to have you on the show here with Chris and I.
Well, thank you. Appreciate being with you. Yeah.
This may not have a lot to do with Hastings County, but we thought the information you could provide for us and our listeners would maybe get some of our listeners, should they have an interaction of their own, to recognize, is it a Sasquatch or not that they're hearing. So we're glad to have you here tonight.
Hi, Ron. Good to hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to hear you. Proud to be with you. Thank you for asking me. Well, what should we talk about first?
Well, I wanted to ask you, what was the first thing that put Sasquatch on your radar? Was it before the Patty Gimlin film, or was it after?
Well, it wasn't really on my radar until this hunting group, the guys that I knew well, they're hunters in the high Sierra of California, and they ran into these things in about 8 miles in the wilderness and 8,400 feet in elevation, one of them got scared off. He just wouldn't go back because it's pretty. The sounds are pretty aggressive sounding to start with, and he wouldn't go back. And the guys that come out when they're supposed to, the other ones, and the wives were all worried, so they wanted him to go back and check and see if the guys had been eaten or what, because they knew the story up there, what was going on. And so he wouldn't go back. Didn't want to go back by himself. He asked me if I'd go with him, so I did, and that's how I got involved. That was 1971. The Johnson brothers had been frequenting this camp since 1958, so they knew the area well, and they didn't know, how long these things might have been observing them before 1971, but it could have been observing them for a long time. They're hunters. Nobody had Bigfoot on the radar, including me. So when I went up there, I didn't know what we were going to be dealing with, a monster or what. So, but we all went up there, and we were all carrying guns. It's a hunting camp and a very pristine area. So that's how it kind of got started for me, and I just kind of jumped into it with both feet and went back as often as I could with whoever would go with me. Part of the group anyway. And it wasn't until 1972 till we took Alan Berry in. He was an investigative reporter who was sent to us via Ivan Sanderson, who wrote a letter to Peter Byrne, who was on the West Coast in Oregon. And Peter, thinking it was a hoax also, sent him down to Alan Berry and wanted to know if he wanted to go check us out. And he did. The 23-page letter that Warren Johnson wrote to Ivan Sanderson was pretty thorough, but Ivan Sanderson, I didn't know this till years later, that they all thought it was a hoax. And we took Alan in 1972, and he started experiencing the same thing. And he started looking around, trying to find out who could be pulling this off, 8 miles in the wilderness, and no one else around. The only thing they left was their huge footprints and huge voices that he was able to record. So he was able to record them also, and he's the one that fostered the sounds, studied the sounds at the University of Wyoming to see if they were not manipulated in any way. They weren't. Professor Curlin, electrical engineer, did a year-long study on them, and he found that they had no evidence of 60-cycle hum, which would show pre-recording, re-recording, showed that they were not speeded up or slowed down, and they were not manipulated. They were outside the human range, way outside, some of them, but they're also inside the human range. And that kind of throws real good curve to us. We thought, well, that's good. We got a professor, but that wasn't enough to get academia on our side yet. That's what Albury, he had a master's degree, Albury did, in science, so he was trying to get solicit professional help for years. He tried it. I write about this in one of my books, but anyway, he ran across what they call cognitive dissonance, and that's where new information just can't be handled by some people. You know, he actually went to Dr. Lieberman at Brown University, and he showed me up. He says, no, only humans can have the vocal mechanism for language, which is true. He's a scientific cognitive primates scientist, and he passed away this year. And he thought Albury was probably trying to pull his leg. Or he thought he might have been a student that he failed at one time, just trying to get back at him or something. So he shut us off. He went to another professor in Washington. He thought he was. He used the sounds as an example to his students to show how people hoax people. None of them really looked at it seriously until Dr. Curlin got a hold of it at the University of Wyoming. And he did. He took it seriously. Al said, I just want to know if they're real, if the tapes are real. He knew they were, but he wanted a professor or someone to say they weren't, or there's some Mickey Mouse going on or something. So anyway, that kind of got started, and it wasn't until 2008 when Scott Nelson got a hold of them by accident through the BFRO network, and he had to come out and talk to us because he thought he'd heard sound in what they put out on their website. And he came out and interviewed me and Albury both, and gave us his credentials, and we vetted him very well. He's a two-time graduate of the Language Institute of Technology in Monterey. That's part of the DOD, or the Department of Defense now. And he was trained by the military to decipher codes, or not decipher, but just to see if it's a code or if it's a language. If it is a language, he's trying to see if there's any foul play in it or something like that. Anyway, that's what he did. So that was a big deal. So you put those two things together, Dr. Curlin saying they're outside the human range, they represented, what he said, a little clip there was representing an animal that's over 8 foot tall. Put that together with Scott Nelson saying they have a language by the human definition of language. Then you got Dr. Lieberman saying that only humans have language. That puts it into they have a human component. And that's the hyoid bone, in your throat, connected to the muscle system, into your nerves, into the brain, so we can talk sapiently like we're doing now.
Yeah.
And we're the only animals that can do that. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, the one thing that, I've got both your books here. They just arrived like yesterday, and I got through half of the Voice in the Wilderness. So, and I got to the part where you have Albury in the camp, and so, like you said, he was out there looking for a hoax, and he's going through your bags and whatnot, looking for something or other. And could you describe the look on his face when all this went off, when he started, I'd imagine, getting the recordings and all these monsters out in the wilderness start mouthing off to you guys? Like, what was his reaction?
Well, he was a little bit shocked. He's still trying to find out how that could happen up there, because it was dark, so we couldn't see each other's faces. But he was definitely at attention, looking, trying to figure out, just looking. And we're all looking, trying to see these things. When they was making the noise, we'd jump out of the shelter. We was all inside the shelter pretty much. But Albury dug a little hole in the top of the shelter, and he stuck his head up there when these things were trying to talk. But when he did that, they wouldn't make the sound like they could see him or something. But he had his microphone remoted up behind the shelter a little ways, and stuck to a little tree. And the sounds just came in real clear when he recorded. Those are the ones he had studied at the University of Wyoming. So he was till his dying day, he always thought it'd make a better story if it could have been a hoax. But you can't figure this one out. The hoax you can get to the bottom of generally, find out who could be running around with us or something. But we knew that wasn't happening. We were getting glimpses of that once in a while, and we're just too far back in the wilderness, too imposing area to get to just to go up there. Plus, they'd have to know when we was going in, and they'd have to figure it all out, and people didn't know that. We didn't talk about it much back then, just our friends and relatives, or just our relatives, really, because it's kind of hard to believe these things actually trying to talk to people, and that they have a language. But language isn't that unheard of with these things. They have the according to who was it? Not Fred Beck, but Albert Osman there in Inlet.
Yep.
When he was kidnapped supposedly by a male, and held captive for 6 days, he was hearing them chatter amongst themselves. And that's in John Green's book, Apes Among Us. And he was there for 6 days, and that's the first written report from John Green about them having been able to talk. So that kind of got me started on all this, and it just keeps going from there. I've been doing it now since 71. I was 29 then, and I'm still getting around, but it's not like it used to be.
Well, now you got a little bit more technology to help you out, like some ATVs and side-by-sides that get you out there. So,
But nobody had to clean out their underwear in the creek or anything the next day, or.
Well, we got kind of used to it after a while. We realized they weren't going to come in and after us. They could have tore our shelter apart if they wanted to,
yeah.
for sure. And we had guns. We're all heavily armed. You don't know what you're dealing with then.
Yeah.
And we still don't know what he's dealing with. It might have been just pure alien. We call them Bigfoot because they had a big foot. They left a big print. And but who knows? I think there's more than one kind of these things, more than one type. And I get into that in my second book, The Quantum Bigfoot, because I do believe in aliens and UFOs, and I present that in my program too when I'm talking to conferences and things. But I think there's possibly an alien connection from eons ago, and something that's given them their attributes and their sentiency, and that's what only humans are supposed to have. But they have it, and they are out there. And anybody listening, I don't try to convince people Bigfoot exists. I just try to give information on what I think they are, and be careful because some of them are different than others and don't know what you're dealing with.
Yes.
Guns never bothered them when we were up there. I mean,
It's almost like some individuals out there are so close-minded. It's like having a locked car that they're sitting in with no tires. You're not going anywhere.
Well, it's your cognitive dissonance, just like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So how many different types of species do you think there are? I mean, I've read about four or five. But...
Well, I have no idea. I mean, having different types of species of aliens, you think they're visit this planet,
True.
Messages with the genome of different species. That's what I think has happened. Different type of aliens have done different things. We have the jewel of this solar system. We have a really nice planet here that we're screwing up. And I think they're kind of concerned about that, but they've been here messing with the humans and with the primates, for a long time. We're hybrids, if you really want to get into it. Something created us the way we are. I just don't think evolution tells the whole story. It tells part of it. The troglodytes did evolve, I'm sure. Too much data to prove that did happen. But what gave us our consciousness? What gave us the essence of who we really are? We're a consciousness embodied. And that's what these things are too, I believe. They have a consciousness. Just too smart and too clever. We couldn't trick them as much as we tried.
What kind of tricks?
Camera traps. Everybody wants to know why we didn't get a picture if all this stuff was going on. Well, as you guys know, you're researchers too. It's not that easy to get a picture. And even if you got a camera, sometimes you're froze when it happens. You just don't think about picking up the camera. You just want to see it,
Yeah. You want to take it all in. No wonder nobody ever thinks about pulling out their phone these days. So.
Well, and when they do, it's a blurry.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Bigfoot just is blurry.
Yeah, right. Ron,
That's because they move so fast.
Ron, I got to ask you there, here's some observations that I've made. And, listening to your tapes where you hear these whoops going off, and I'll probably just play you a little sample here. So these whoops, now we get some owl imitations up here in Canada. So you get anything along that lines?
Yes. I do believe they can imitate just about any animal. They got a real expansive vocal mechanism, so I think they can go way out. I think they can go ultrasound, infrasound, and in between. They just I think they can mimic anything. I think it's quite a good hunting attributes they have. But yeah, I thought my daughter and I walked in there one time. Her and I was sitting there and heard what we thought was an owl up the canyon up there a little ways, and I'll pull out my little recorder here and tape that. I did, but the speaker button squealed when I turned it on, and you know how that happens. And, well, maybe you don't. It's a cassette recorder. But But anyway,
Yeah.
the owl sound turned into a Bigfoot chatter.
Oh, okay.
So it was a Bigfoot mimicking an owl. And there are owls. A lot of people hear owls and think it's a Bigfoot, and maybe it is.
Mm-hmm.
What gives them away generally is the amplitude. They're very loud, their amplitude.
Right.
Not the owl, but the Bigfoot.
Do you get many Canada goose flying up in your neck of the woods of the Sierra Nevada mountains there?
I've never seen them, no.
The reason why I asked you that, because like, you know, on some of those whoops, it sounds like somebody is like on a goose flute, like a goose call, that are just like a bad goose call. That's what it sounds like to me. So I'm just wondering, it's like they're imitating owls. I was just curious whether there was Canada goose that migrating through your area at all. That's where they picked that up.
No, I don't think so. We're in the high Sierras. I don't think they do, but I don't know that for sure. But I've never witnessed them. What I think the whoops are, and they were very close to our shelter when we just recorded whoops. I said very close, probably 30, 40 yards. And they have different types of whoops, different intonations to them, and I think they're signaling each other, because a lot of times they'll start their evening off, if you want to call it that, when they're coming in, you hear a big wood crack or something like that, and you hear rock pounding and wood knocking going on in rhythmically form, like they're going back and forth. You hear one on one side and one on the other side. And then you start hearing the whoops. But we learned this to be still and don't react to them. And the more they don't think they have your attention, the more they might. What they're looking for is you're going to jump up with a gun or something, I think. I don't know what they're looking for, but I would imagine if I was out there making sounds like that with around a bunch of hunters, I'd be curious if they're going to shoot at me or not.
Right.
Yeah.
But by then, this was 1974 when I recorded the whooping sounds that you've heard that I put out on my second CD. And like I say, they have different intonations to them, different types of whoops. And I do believe it's just say to one of the other ones something. It's a code of some type. I don't know what it means, but I think it's a way of communicating.
People are still skeptical. Somebody like a Joe Rogan or something like that. How could you guys?
I've challenged Joe Rogan. If he would just step out and try to mimic those. According to the studies we've had done, human vocal mechanism cannot reach sounds these things do. Plus, they step on each other. Two of them argue at each other.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, he did a bad thing. He did a bad service to himself when he did that, because the science behind what was done. It's not like he backed up a truck to some dirt road and pulled out a six-pack and had a ball making some sounds.
Exactly.
We went way back in the wilderness, and he doesn't know the history. He doesn't know the science that's been done on these things,
yep,
and the work that we've done towards them to accredit them. And to him to say he can make that sound, well, he might be able to make some of the sound, but he can't make some of those sounds that I've got. And I've challenged him because at one time I was supposed to be on his program, and I didn't get on there because I didn't like his bullshit meter. I didn't think a lot of him at the time, but he's gotten a pretty good listening audience now. I'd go back with him, but again, I'm going to challenge him if he does, and if he does ever ask me. But he won't ask me now. I mentioned this in conferences I go about Joe Rogan, because I heard he downplayed our sounds and said he could do them well. No, he can't. And I'll just make that statement right now. No, he can't.
And there's tons of other sounds they make, like woodpecker sounds and what have you, too, that we've heard.
Yeah.
But it sounded like these woodpeckers at 3 o'clock in the morning, which woodpeckers aren't active at that hour, banging on like metallic siding of some sort, which was absolutely bizarre. Either metallic or plastic of some sort,
Well, we heard metallic sounds up there in the Sierra camp.
Oh, do tell.
Nothing around that could account for that. These things, I think, can make that sound. One time we thought our camp was being torn apart, which I talk about a lot, but we thought our barrels that we had hauled in on the mules were to put supplies in were opened and stuff flying around. And you go out there later after all the commotion stopped and nothing's moved, nothing's changed. You can't explain that in classical terms. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And last time I had something happen up there was in 2016, and I saw this rod of light go by, which David Pilates recreated that in 2018 on that missing 401 The Hunted, and did a real good job recreating that light when I took. He and I went up there with this filmmaker, and anyway, it just come floating by the tent we had set up. We had you could see out the top. So I watched this thing, and we did, and it just, what do you do with that? Just an anomaly, just something strange. There's a lot of strange things went on up there, and that's what got me into the quantum theory, because I find out that quantum laws work throughout the universe, not just in the micro world like some people claim, but they work all the way from the atom through the stars, according to Dr. Christopher Blair and West Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. So if quantum physics is a rule out there, and it is, it's a fact. It rides on the back of Newtonian physics, which we live by, a three-dimensional environment where everything is material, physical, measurable, predictable. Well, quantum physics isn't like that. And if you want to conceive quantum physics, you have to think what the end of the universe might look like. Mm-hmm. You can't imagine it. So just got to open your mind up that you can't get your head totally around it, but it's there and it's being used every day. The technology is just happening. How do we, anyway, it goes on, but I get into a lot of quotes in my book about Einstein and Tesla, because according to Tesla, everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. And when you really start looking at that, we are energy, frequency, and vibration. According to Einstein, if you can find the frequency of something, you can change matter. Well, that's hard to get your head around. How do you change matter? You're looking at it. You can't just change it. Well, you can just change it. You can find the frequency of it. And according to Dr. Paul Dirac in 1933, he got the Nobel Prize for the mathematical equation, which states that matter and energy was antimatter. Is what he did. But it shows where matter and energy are interchangeable. Einstein said the same thing. That's in his equation, E equals mc squared. So if you get into Paul Dirac's and it was in 2012, CERN from the Switzerland, the Hadron Collider established that physically when they changed particle into energy. So that can happen. People say, well, how did this? Nothing can disappear. Well, yes, things can disappear. Go out of our perception. We only see within certain frequencies. Everything is frequency, even light. We see within 430 terahertz. That's not very much compared to all the other frequencies that are out there. There's a lot of things we don't see that's going on. And there's a lot of things like a bear. A bear will smell 2,100 times better than we can. We don't have the olfactory sense of a bear, nor do we have the olfactory sense of a dog who can hear ultrasound. Anyway, just a lot of things that open people's minds up to understanding that we just don't see everything. We just don't know what all is really going on around us all the time. We think we're the top notch here on this planet, but the only thing we've been given is dominion. We've not been, it's not open. We still got available.
Well, I think you're onto something there, Ron, because I think there's another dimension there. Like, how many dimensions you figure we have?
Well, according to physics, there's 10 dimensions, 11 counting time. The fourth dimension is time.
Right.
And that's been established. So we live in 3 dimensions, and there's 11 altogether. So
I think we have 12 dimensions, because if you look at the political field, because we're living in a clown dimension now too.
Well, I got to tell you, there's probably so many dimensions you couldn't number them.
Could be.
Just that there's been 11 established by the math and quantum physics. Yeah.
I think we've both seen like ghosts, which we consider the paranormal. But people are, what's getting a lot of traction is the UFO topic of extraterrestrial. But, people need to look at also the extra dimensional thing, which is the woo topic there too, because basically, extraterrestrial
I'm not
considered woo also.
Well, and plus they go to church on Sunday and think about God and pray to something, and they're saying they don't believe in the woo. Come on, it's not something you see. You've seen God, no, but they believe in it. So, it's interesting how people have a closed mind to anything outside of what they can see. And like Edgar Mitchell said, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, he said, it takes classical and quantum sciences together to have clear perception. And I really like that statement, because if we all just take that to heart and start using that, we'd see understand more. You talked about ghosts a minute ago. Well, my thought on ghosts is they just haven't, their frequency hasn't risen high enough to get out of the fourth dimension of time, and you see them occasionally when their temperature's right. Mm-hmm. And it's just the way it goes. And cat's eyes will see. They can see more than what our eyes will see. They can see at other frequencies, I think. And, but yeah, there's a lot going on. Don't tell us what's around us right now that you're not even seeing.
Ron, I'm sorry, like, coming in on you there, but I was just curious, like, just trying to pick your brain. Like, we'd be at this one particular site, and we'd have, and we'd get these weird strobe lights coming out of the ground, lighting up the vegetation. And then next thing you know, Bigfoot would be stomping around. We can't see him, but we can hear him and growling at him, at us. And so, any other reports about like strobe lights and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
It's just energy. Not some. I wouldn't call them strobe lights. I'd call it orbs. A lot of people even claim they saw Bigfoot disappear, and all of a sudden they see an orb.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
But now, and that's where, let me give you this little piece of what I think. It's, if energy and matter are transferable, if these things change their matter into energy, they would disappear out of our perception.
Yeah.
And that would also cause trackways to stop in the middle of nowhere because they wouldn't have any more. They wouldn't have any more density. Yeah. So that's my theory on how trackways stop. I've heard that report for years. You know, how trackways just stopped and couldn't seem to go anywhere. In fact, Fred Beck behind Mount St. Helens, 1934, I guess, right in there somewhere. He said that they followed trackway and it would have had to trackway just stop, but it would have had to jump 160 feet to have not left another track.
Wow.
And it was kind of in a mud thing or something, I believe, if I read that story right. But you know, they could change their matter into energy. That's how I qualify what I'm saying as far as they could disappear. Matter and energy are interchangeable. That's a fact. And if matter and energy are interchangeable, I think possibly it could be through the vocal mechanism because it's so expansive that they can reach the frequency that would change their matter into energy that would cause them to pixelate and get out of your perception. And that would cause their trackways to stop.
Yeah, that's why they reported.
We've had lots of reports sent in to us about people seeing a being like turning into almost like a clear, transparent saran wrap.
Yeah. Well, David Paulides, who did that Missing 401 CD, I got about 15 minutes of that, and the section right after mine was a lady who was tree hunting, and she saw that pixelation go from one tree to another. At the same time, there was a UFO being seen down about a mile away down at the school by a bunch of kids and people. So anyway, it's that predator effect, they call it. It looks like that. And I know some people that have seen that very thing. I've never saw it, but then I wonder why we didn't see them more often up there. There's times when I had my headset on inside that shelter. I had a best cassette recorder you could buy in those days, battery operated with D batteries, and 2 stereo microphones, one on each side of the shelter. I could hear this thing walking around, bipedal walking around out there. And I was looking through the cracks of the shelter, waiting for the moonlight to flicker or something. Never did see that, yet you hear it out there. And it's just stuff like that. I wonder how many times if they were cloaking, if that's what they were doing. Mm-hmm. Is that? Well, I only seen them one time in 1974. My daughter saw them 3 times. The Johnson brothers got glimpses. Bill McDowell got glimpses. We all had those little glimpses, but just to come out and stand up there and look at you and walk to you and say, hi, ooga, ooga, that's a tree. Now you know my language. But that's what Scott Nelson needs. He can transcribe it as a language by the human definition of language, which is morpheme stream of words. But when you get into that's what the human definition of these things have. That they have cognitive language. That's kind of unique. I think it's very unique. How they got that is a big question. That's where I relate to UFOs, because you ask me how many species there might be here. Well, how many species of aliens have been here and messed with the genome? And I think they've done that to acclimate. There's a hybridization program going on. I think it's been going on for eons. Mm-hmm. And that's to acclimate their species to this planet. And they're concerned that we're destroying the planet, and we are. We're blowing people up. That's my take on it.
I was listening to the tapes that, or sorry, the recordings that came with the book that's a download online, and we could hear one of these Sasquatch breathing with a wheeze or something at the back of their exhale or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
My opinion is he had asthma or something. No, I mean, I don't know.
Like
Definitely not a smoker.
No, that's just an interesting sound. I'll put it on there.
So,
I forgot about that one.
Like as far as the volume of the sound there, did it sound like something like a horse or something like that? Because just curious with the lung capacity.
I imagine their lung capacity is about like a horse, if not bigger.
Yeah.
We found some tracks up there that would suggest an animal 10, 12 foot tall, and that's one of the tracks we found, not in our camp, but up on a ridge on this trackway of 4 huge tracks, and they were 25.5 inches, and they were 13 feet apart, and the thing wasn't running. So
Wow.
it's just kind of, that suggests something, at least 12 foot tall.
Yeah, at least.
So, and that's not unheard of. I was up in Alaska at that Alaska Killer Bigfoot program with the Discovery Channel or was it 21, I think it was, and where they in Porlock. I don't know if you've heard of that story or not, but Porlock is a little village that got abandoned in the late 40s because some big creature, Bigfoot-like creature, was killing the people, and they lost 30 people when they all just got abandoned the village, a fishing village. Mm-hmm. And the story is these guys want to re-habituate the village, but they want to know if it's safe or not because they don't want to get there and get torn apart. They were fine. That's documented, by the way, in the story in the newspapers up there in Alaska. And these villagers wanted to, so a documentary took an 8-part series. I think I was in episode 4 and 5, something like that. They want to know what it took to re-habituate the area so they could start their fishing again. Mm-hmm. But as I flew over in the helicopter, because they had to transport me in there like that, and I circled around a little bit and seen where years ago it had been timbered heavily. Trees are going back up, but you can still see a little bit of the old growth here and there. And I think they were overfishing it from the pictures I saw. They were overfishing it, they were over-timbering it, and they were also mining it. So I got a feeling that this is just what I think. If they were doing that and these things were being encroached upon too much, they might have came sticking their head out of that forest and yelling at them. If you had a 12, 15-foot tall Bigfoot-looking creature screaming at you, chances are you'd shoot at it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think was going on, because these guys knew something was out there, and they had their rifles with them. I think and that would piss them off. So they lost the battle, though. So anyway, I told them just respect the land and don't overfish it, don't over timber it again, don't do that stuff, and you might get along with these things. I gave them some suggestions, which was not aired, but that's what I suggest. I don't know if they're going to do another series this year or not.
Yeah, whether show you're a good neighbor, perhaps, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
because the Russian, there had been people there for eons at that area. It is such a pristine and good fishing area. The Russians had been there. Other villagers had been there prior to this village, and this village left, like I said, in the late 40s, and they hadn't been habituated since. So anyway, yeah, I think when the timbering started and the overfishing all that started, that probably is what did them in.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
I was going to pick your brain on, have you seen any sort of connections with power line right-of-ways, railway tracks, or
yes.
Water, creeks, or what have you? What's the...
Yeah, especially the power. I think they need power to generate their energy. I'm writing another book now, and it's got a whole chapter on trees. I think there's some significance with trees. When you start cutting trees down, it bothers them. And I've had so many reports over the years of these things being seen when they were cutting trees down, especially clear cutting. And I think they got some going on with trees. I got a couple people I know quite well that claim they saw them go in and out of a tree. And you got the native lore, which says they live in two worlds. Well, of course, we could say one dimension is one, they live in fifth dimension, the other time they're going in third dimension with us. What's going on with trees with these things? I think sometimes when you hear these banging on trees, that's maybe, this is going to sound really ridiculous, but
Not us.
if they can change their mass into energy, they might go into trees and recharge there. I know there's a lot of reports around power lines too, and I know our batteries go dead sometimes up there. They could just pull them dead.
Yeah.
But if they're doing that with trees, that would cause them to not like you cutting trees down. Plus, trees are our life source too. You know, they give us what we breathe, and I think that's another thing we're doing wrong on this earth is that they'll never stop that. I don't think.
Well, here's a little point here, like having lived up in Hastings County where it got so cold at night, you can literally hear the trees cracking so loud that it almost sounds like a gunshot. So you might be onto something there. That's hopeful.
Well, that was where I was going to go with my next thought is in 2011, the last time I actually heard the chattering, I was up there and I heard this big wham, just like a gunshot. I write in my book, I think it's one of the last chapters, in the Voices of the Wilderness, that there was a tree knock. But, you know, no one's ever saw them hit a tree.
Yeah.
I got to believe it was not now. It's so loud. It was like a gunshot going off right outside my little tent I set up. I went outside because it's still daylight, and I started talking. I was by myself, which I shouldn't have done, but I had a guy scheduled to go with me, and he backed out the last minute. So Scott Nelson and I had been up there 3 times that summer, stayed a week at a time. He's trying to get more cooperative sounds or something, but nothing definitively happened. Things happened, but unless you can couple it with, you know, sighting or trackway or vocalizations, trackway or tracks or something there to pin it down, so that was definitely a Bigfoot, not just something else. I always have to have some kind of corroboration in my thinking. So, but this thing made this big sound right outside my tent, and I'm wondering now if it wasn't the energy coming out of the tree. That sounds a little ridiculous, but if they do live in trees, like native lore says they do live in trees, that would also explain you don't see very many of them.
Well, it makes sense.
Very often.
It makes sense to one or two stories I've heard where the tree is a skinny tree, like 6 inches maybe in diameter, and somebody saw the Sasquatch and it walks behind the tree and doesn't come out from the other side. The Sasquatch is that much larger than the tree, and then it just doesn't continue out the other side, and it just disappears that way. That's a good point. I talked to a guy just not too long ago, it's a year or two now, but he was hunting this area and been hunting there for a long time, but run into these things, and he kind of hold me because he had to get hold of somebody to talk about this. He's a very credible person. He said he's seen one step out of this brush. Well, first of all, he was hunting. This deer shot by him and got on the other side of this little meadow and just froze and shot straight back right by him. He said, deers don't do that. Yeah. And he thought there must be a bear or something over there, so he started looking over there, and this Bigfoot steps out behind this tree over this brush. He finally told me, he said, no, I've seen part of it. He didn't see its leg, one of its legs. And I said, well, he said the thing was massive. It had to be 4 foot wide in the shoulders. And I said, well, how big was the tree? You know, that's the strength. I mean, the tree's only 2 foot. See, you should have been able to see it behind the tree. Yeah.
If it's that big, it would. You don't hide behind a tree that size. And then I think another guy up in Oregon, he showed me a picture that he would not show anybody else, but he'd want to get ramrodded by a bunch of investigators. But he trusted me not to talk about it. But here I am. I ain't going to tell you who he is. He's got a picture. He was driving along where him and his son have been having some encounters with these things back in the woods in Oregon. And he was just taking pictures of outside when he's driving with his camera. And he didn't think much of it. But later, when he was watching it on his home screen, he seen his head stick out behind this tree and then moved back just real quick. He showed me that. And I mean, it was the classical Bigfoot head. It just come out behind this little tree. The tree was just small. But he thought it was behind the tree, but it couldn't have been behind the tree if it was as big as the head appeared like it had to be. Mm-hmm. So it just makes you give that a little bit of pause and think about it. They'd be doing that. They really have a thing about trees. I've talked to too many people that see more on trees when they're cutting trees.
I had an experience somewhat like that where I thought it was well up by Parry Sound, Ontario in 2004, and this is probably the weekend that I got onto the topic. Like, I've always known of Sasquatch, and I myself had seen some of the stuff in the 80s when I was a kid, saw the Patty Gimlin footage, and then this was the eye-opening weekend for me. I was whistled at the one night while out at the campfire by myself. There was only 4 of us at this off-grid cottage, and the only ones on the lake that we knew of. There was only 4 or 5 cottages there, and there was nobody else on a Sunday night. And as I stoked the fire, I got whistled at. I kind of made a smoochy noise. I always tell everybody I whistled back, but just not to sound so weird. But I made a smooching noise, like a kissy noise, and then kind of shook my head because we were having some drinks. And it's about 1:30 in the morning, and then I got whistled at again. So anyway, flash forward the next day, I was down on the dock and enjoying a smoke, and the other 3 were out in a canoe, and I just got the feeling of being watched, and I would turn quickly and look up the hill, and there was the one time where I thought I saw a head poke back in behind this one skinny tree, no bigger than 6 inches.
Yeah, there you go.
Have you ever worked with anybody on remote viewing these beings?
No, I haven't. I know some people that do remote viewing. In fact, I know 2 that works for the FBI, 2 different ones.
Wow.
For remote viewing. That's part of the DoD now, part of defense, but it still goes on. Because remote viewing is where your consciousness is separate from your body. We've got it in our heads. We think it's in our brain, but it's not really part of our brain. It's something that, Einstein even said, energy can't die. It only changes form. So if you go and change form, if you're religious and you die, you think you're going to go to heaven. Well, if you're a physicist and you die, you just change forms. Mm-hmm. And so if you can move your consciousness around wherever, and some people do, and I've done that. I think anybody could do it because
I as well.
You do it at night too. But yeah, remote viewing is a real thing, and it's uncanny how accurate some of these people are.
Yeah. I haven't tested myself, but when I'm trying to do it at times, typically I fall asleep. But there's been times where I'm out and then I slam right back into my body, and then I'm awake, and that's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's, I don't do drugs. We weren't doing drugs up there, or even drinking up there, but sometimes I wonder if drugs might help connect that veil that's there. Because there was a time when I was in a military hospital in Portland. I was way up on a hill, and they'd give me morphine or something like that. You know what that'll do to you, but I went out the window, and I was not in physically, but my mind did. And I was flying all over that city. It was wonderful. I could fly, but I just wonder sometimes if that isn't some type of releases something in our pineal gland or someplace in our heads that allows us to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the pineal gland or some other part of your brain that we just don't use that maybe.
Well, I got a whole article on the pineal gland in my quantum book. How significant I think it is. It's the third eye, the eye of Horus. I think if you connect your pineal gland with your heart, which has a brain, by the way, and you get those 2 connected, because I think you receive through your pineal gland. I think that's a receptor for the humanoids. It's a pineal gland. You can receive. You do that through meditation, not by praying and talking. You do it through relaxing and receiving information. And information can come to you like that. And if you can connect that to the heart, because you got to go by the heart, get the heart and the brain in coherence. Once the heart and the brain are in coherence, as you do that through the chakras, balancing your system. And I believe when those 2 are in coherence, then your mind will follow your heart. And that's what you really should go by, is your gut feeling, your heart. And I think that's what's been receiving information through the pineal gland. And that's I think a pretty good connection right there. But you do that, like I say, through meditation. And don't come overnight. You got to practice it, but you can. And I think that's where you get into your dream state. Sometimes you'll wake up and you'll have the answer to something. Tesla had answers to a lot of his issues when we wake up after sleeping. And then I know when I'm writing something or doing something significant, I'll sit on it at night, wait and see if I can come up with a better solution the next morning. Yeah. I think that's just it's always worked for me. And I don't know if the information's coming that way or not, but I theorize that it is.
I've had that happen.
We get our answers. Because the universe knows everything. It knows what you're supposed to do. You can learn how to listen to it, you're going to be okay.
Other another topic there that I think we haven't touched on. Well, sort of touched on, but I know we personally had problems with audio recorders being tampered with or shut off or drained batteries and
The infrared camera.
You name it. Yeah. So I'm sure you probably experienced the same things there, Ron?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We only had cassettes. We was able to record them. For some reason, they let us do that. And maybe it's just so I can talk to you guys today. I don't know. But we also, later on, we was trying to really expose it, get some more information. Like when I went through with Scott Nelson, his batteries would be drained sometimes. He'd take a whole load of batteries up there. Yeah, they do drain batteries. There's a thing going on with energy with them, and I think they need energy to do what they do. They might need energy to go in and out of these trees. I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds so ridiculous, but just from the outset of it, most people listening to this would put me in the funny farm right now, but might be something to that.
No, I bet you there's tons of people out there and that experience the same things that we're sort of talking about, and hopefully, that's the reason why we're talking here today, that maybe they might just come out of the closet, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Question: what about Dogman or Little People? What about other cryptids of such?
Yeah. I think they probably can exist as much as Bigfoot could exist, just because I do believe aliens have been here, coming here. I've seen evidence of them in Peru, Bolivia, wherever. I've been all over the world really researching.
That's what
and you see that stuff.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you see that, when you see that stuff with your own eyes, you know that something with higher technology has been here in the past. And I just believe aliens have been visiting this planet for eons, and they've done some manipulation with the genome of species. So why not a dogman?
Yeah.
It's what the agenda and what kind of attributes they give them and what their agenda is what we don't know. That's why I caution people, just keep your guard up, because when you're around these things, you don't know what to expect. But I don't think anything's supposed to really interfere with us that much. They're just not supposed to mess with our karma, what we're supposed to respond to. Life, in my opinion, is about responding to issues and responding to experiences that we're given, that we've chosen to have. I think we've chosen to have them so we can respond to them with compassion instead of with hate. So when something happens, you want to respond to it properly. That raises your personal vibrational frequency, and that gets you out of this dimension. When you do pass on, you don't have to come back and experience it again. Because one way or the other, you're going to have to learn a lesson. If you hurt somebody bad, the only way I can tell my grandchildren, the only way you're going to hurt yourself, you hurt somebody else. But just treat people with love and compassion.
I was going to ask you, too, about, I was going through your book, and you have a chapter on the Lovelock Caves there. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I've been there 4 times. I'm trying to get information from the museum or from the BLM or somebody that would let us look at the artifact that was uncovered there in 1911 by some bat guana miners. And I think they found underneath about 4 or 5 feet of bat guana all these remnants of giants. That's what the story is anyway, from Sarah Winnemucca, who wrote a book about it. But the Lovelock Caves, they were claiming that the Paiutes were claiming that there was giants, cannibalistic giants actually, and they drove all in the cave and set fire to the cave and shot them as they came out with arrows, obviously. That was the story of Winnemucca, Sarah Winnemucca. And the Paiutes swear by it. Now, BLM, I wrote the LS, artifacts have all been taken away now, Smithsonian. If somebody's got it now, you can't see it. However, I got a picture of a skull anyway.
I'll place it right here.
From a guy that got him before Smithsonian did. And I better keep my mouth shut here and get tackled. The Paiutes claimed that they were warring with these giants. They all pooled together, all the Paiutes in the area, and ganged up on them and supposedly killed them all. 8 foot tall, 9 foot tall. There's a couple skeletons in the Humboldt lake bed there that's been found that are 8, 9 foot tall. So there were giants there, but BLM said no, just robust people. There were no giants there. Well, they just won't admit it because they're afraid the cave would get inundated with people trying to dig up some more. But they've kind of got that as a monument now. You can't just go in there and do anything you want to do. You got to just, well, we did do something we weren't supposed to do. I'm going to stop talking about that.
Where is the Lovelock Cave?
Anyway, it's right out in Lovelock, Nevada, about 20 miles out of Lovelock.
We also seen something that you have in your book about the giants with the double row of teeth. Now, that's disturbing.
Yeah, in fact, the picture that I was given has double row teeth. And also, L.A. Missoula, who I went to South America with a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a picture of a double row teeth. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to look that up.
They also, some got 6 fingers and 6 toes. And you've heard about the Kandahar giant. Of course,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Finns put that on wraps now. But I know L.A., and he vets people very thoroughly. He interviewed the pilot, and he also interviewed one of the guys on the ground that was there when it all took place. And he's for sure that it's genuine. We'll never know about it. We're only given information we think we can handle, and it's not going to disturb the narrative the government gives us. They give us the narrative, and that's what they expect us to believe. Like Roswell was a weather balloon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a Japanese weapon, some kind. Yeah, I've heard all kinds of stories on that one.
Well, I think you've got to have your head in the sand to not believe in UFOs and aliens now.
Yeah,
they're here now.
What about the minaret skull? What is that?
Yeah, Al Berry and I went in there. I rode horses into the minarets and looking for the meadow that Dr. Denton said he found a large skull. His donkey had packed some Boy Scouts in there and pawed it up. Well, he looked at it and he thought, he sent it off to UCLA, make a long story short here, but UCLA just ended up losing it. Al Berry chased that down and nobody could give me any information after it hit UCLA. No record. Well, Dr. Denton, he interviewed Dr. Denton himself. He lives over there somewhere, Nevada, I think. Anyway, yeah, I'd love like that. Was a fun adventure. We stayed back there several days digging around where supposedly that skull was found, see if there was something else, but we didn't find anything. We had more fun fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever spoke to anybody about the recovery of the bodies of the dead Sasquatch after the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980?
I haven't. I've heard stories about that, but I've not directly talked to any of them. I've heard them, but I've not talked to. I've not interviewed anybody that had anything to do with that. I don't doubt that. That's where the Ape Canyon is, where Fred Beck shot one of them. Supposedly, they never could find the body.
Yeah.
He took a crew in there to look for it too. He's the one who said that the trackways. He thought to his dying day there was something paranormal about. Let me say something about paranormal right quick. I'm not a paranormal person. I'm a citizen scientist who looks into quantum physics. Quantum physics, the rules of quantum physics will answer a lot of the paranormal. Paranormal is a super pseudoscience, but quantum physics is not. It's a science that might answer a lot of the anomalies that people are witnessing, and they call it paranormal. Just something they haven't figured out how it happens yet. I just want to throw that in there. People will say I'm a woo-woo or something. Well, woo-woo is the paranormal, and you can call it that if you want to, but I'm trying to answer the questions that happens in that woo-woo world with the laws of quantum physics, which is prevailing law throughout the universe.
Well, you're definitely onto something there, because, like I said, extraterrestrial, people believe it. Extra-dimensional, it's the woo, same thing.
Well, I think the subtitle of my quantum book is bringing science and spirituality back together, because science and spirituality, quantum science, quantum physics, and spirituality is synonymous in my books. Mm. A lot of things I got because I was raised religiously, and I just couldn't buy a lot of things that religions put to people. But there's a lot of nuggets in there that you just got to research it all the way back. I went all day past the Hebrew into Aramaic. I studied a lot of that stuff, and there's a lot of like the masters of old. How'd they do their miracles? Did Jesus really do miracles? Mm-hmm. He did them through the laws of quantum physics, and I think, because he says we can do the same thing. I have yet to walk on water. I have yet to turn water into wine. If I could do those things, I'd probably reach my full potential. But we have not reached it. We have not reached it yet. But if we can do what he said we could do, he was using the laws, I think, of quantum physics, which nothing is real until it's observed. You get into a lot of the scriptures that get in the Bible, and it's synonymous with a lot of the rules of quantum physics. Nothing is real until it's observed. Yeah, it says faith is the substance of things hoped for. Well, they kind of work together there. A lot of things do. But I caution everybody, and I advise everybody, do your own homework. Just look into this stuff yourself. Buy simple books on quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And it's not above anybody's head. I mean, I'm not a genius. I'm just a person that just does homework. I'm glad I have, because I think it answers a lot of questions people are having nowadays. And we are living in a very, very interesting time right now.
Yeah.
And I know if Putin or anybody pushes that button over there on a bomb, well, I think that's when the aliens are going to step in, because
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Let's hope they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they will. I do believe it. I think they've probably done it in the past when we've gotten too close to things.
Yeah,
They've manipulated time. There's some aliens are time travelers, and they can come and manipulate time, manipulate events to change things.
Yeah.
That's what I believe too. Not all of them are. A lot of different types of aliens out there.
Speaking about time travel, we almost gone over an hour here. I know we promised not a marathon tonight, but I think we're going to ask you one last question there.
Well, there's a couple of things.
Okay.
Are there other people that we can suggest to our audience that you know of that they should maybe? Well, let me ask you this: have you heard anything up in our neck of the woods that we could maybe research?
I hear things out of Canada quite a bit.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, there's stuff up there. Obviously, you know that.
Yeah.
Stuff on Vancouver Island, even on the other side over there. And I was up in, I've been up in Toba Inlet. I went to flown through Canada in my own airplane several times. Such a vast area, you can't help but think there's all going on. And you got all the Bigfoot supposedly being seen up in Alaska now, too. And yeah, there are being more and more of these things are being exposed, or we're encroaching into the wilderness more as humans, and we're seeing them more. I think you're going to have a big explosion over here, maybe in my lifetime, but maybe afterwards. I'm getting old.
Maybe.
I'd like for it to happen in my lifetime, because it's just a fun time to be alive, you know, and to experience stuff.
Well,
I just got back the other day from talking around in the woods.
I have to ask you, Ron. Now that you dropped the hint, what is the name of your next book that's coming out, and when can we expect it?
It's got a life. It's got to develop its own life. I don't know yet.
Okay.
I've got a couple different names figured out, but every time I think, well, wait, this chapter makes it feel more like this or that, you know. And I don't know when it'll be out. I take my time on it. Sometimes I'll step back from it for a few weeks and then go back into it. I was just working on it when we called. And, you know, when you get back into it, it's never, ever finished, but you just got to get to the point where, okay, that's good enough, I'm going to publish it. And that's where you go with it.
Yeah.
I just want to make it, when you get into this quantum stuff, you got to get kind of bulletproof. Otherwise, people are going to tearing you down. I've been selling a lot of the quantum Bigfoot books because it goes by the rules, you know. It took me a long time to write the quantum book, a couple of years, but the Voices in the Wilderness book, it was just my story, and it was easy to write. So anyway, yeah, anybody can get a hold of me through my website, ronmorehead.com. All the books or CDs. I got 2 CDs I produced too, with the sounds integrated in the narration.
Is there any other?
So anyway,
are there
they're all
any other
downloadable.
Sorry, we keep interrupting each other. Is there anybody else that you can suggest to our listeners that they should maybe check out, or anything on any other researchers or people that you're familiar with?
Well, I'm familiar with all of them, just about.
Definitely David Politis. I love that guy.
Yeah, I would recommend. He's top of my list. I think. He's a quality person, and he's doing another film now on UFOs. And the Missing 401 to Hunt it. He did with me in 2018. Actually, so it's been out a while, but
yeah,
he got a lot of reviews on that. And yeah, this thing's happening. I'm having another filming company trying to do a documentary on me right now. So, but as far as somebody else goes. There's not a lot of people with experience. You know, I've actually experienced these things. You know, some of these researchers talk like they know everything. I hope I didn't come off that way. I don't know everything. I just try to find out what I think I know and reveal it and talk about it. But
who knows everything?
Not a lot of people have had experiences like you guys have and like I have, and write about it and talk about it. There's a lot of people who do talk about it, but they've got no experience. I could name you those, but I don't do that. I just go with the positive. I want to keep my vibration level up.
Exactly. So the one thing you end up, when you have an experience, you have more questions than answers. So
True story.
Well, I guess we can call it quits here.
Well, we won't call it quits.
Not quits.
I'm not
but,
quitting.
we can maybe wind this down a bit. Thanks for coming on, Ron. That was fantastic. You've got me definitely.
Well, thank you.
I gotta get.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoy talking about this stuff. You know, at my age, I don't have anything to prove. I just want to tell people what I think and what I've discovered, what I think I've discovered too.
Excellent.
I like that
That's all.
frame of mind.